The year is 1979. The location, a cold, depressing hotel room in Los Angeles. Inside that room sat a man who believed his life was over. To the world, he was the Prince of Darkness, the legendary frontman of Black Sabbath, the band that practically invented heavy metal. But behind that closed door, Ozzy Osbourne was a man without a country, without a band, and without hope. He had just been fired. Not just from a job, but from his identity. His bandmates, the brothers he had conquered the world with, had reached their breaking point. The drugs, the alcohol, and the internal chaos had become too much. They showed him the door, and in that moment the industry didn't just walk away from Ozzy, they buried him. The whispers in the music press were brutal. They said he was a has-been. They said he wouldn't last a year on his own. They predicted he would be another tragic footnote in the history of rock and roll, a talented man who let his demons win. Ozzy spent 3 months in that hotel room with the curtains drawn. He was penniless, broken, and convinced that the music had died. This is the moment where most stories end. Usually, the rock star fades into obscurity or meets a tragic end. But this is where the hero's journey truly begins. Because being a hero isn't about never falling, it's about what you do when you're lying in the dirt and everyone is walking over you. While the world was preparing his professional obituary, something was flickering inside Ozzy. It was a spark of defiance. He wasn't just a singer, he was a survivor. He didn't know it yet, but the rejection he faced from Black Sabbath was the very thing that would allow him to build an empire of his own. This wasn't the end of a legend. It was the painful, messy, and necessary birth of a solo king. The world thought they had seen the last of Ozzy Osbourne, but he was about to prove that you can't kill the Prince of Darkness. To understand the hero, you have to understand the struggle of the climb. By 1980, Ozzy Osbourne was no longer just a man in a dark hotel room. He was a man on a mission, but he couldn't do it alone. Every king needs a general, and every legend needs a spark. That spark arrived in the form of a young, blonde, classically trained guitar virtuoso named Randy Rhoads. Randy was everything Ozzy wasn't, disciplined, technical, and quiet. But when they stood in a room together, the chemistry was undeniable. It wasn't just a partnership, it was a rescue mission. Randy didn't just play guitar, he gave Ozzy a new voice. While the critics were still laughing about Ozzy's exit from Black Sabbath, Ozzy and Randy were in the studio crafting what would become the blueprint for 1980s metal, Blizzard of Oz. This era was the ultimate test of defiance. Ozzy had to fight on 3 fronts. First, he was fighting his own reputation. The industry viewed him as a wild card, a liability that no label wanted to touch. He had to walk into boardrooms and prove he was still a draw, famously even bringing doves to a high-level meeting, an act of chaos that turned into a marketing masterstroke. Second, he was fighting a changing musical landscape. Punk had come and gone, and the new wave of British heavy metal was rising. To stay relevant, Ozzy had to be faster, louder, and more melodic than ever before. Finally, he was fighting the shadow of his own past. Every interview centered on his former band. Every review compared his solo work to his time in Sabbath. But then, the world heard Crazy Train, that iconic opening riff, a mix of classical precision and raw, distorted power, announced to the world that Ozzy Osbourne didn't need a band to be a legend. He was the legend. The success was instantaneous, but the journey was far from easy. The hero was constantly under fire. There were lawsuits, there were protests from parents who feared his influence, and then, the most devastating blow of all, the tragic death of Randy Rhoads in a plane crash. For any other artist, this would have been the final curtain. The loss of his closest collaborator and friend sent Ozzy back into the darkness. But this is where the hero becomes a survivor. Instead of folding, Ozzy honored Randy's memory by pushing forward. He realized that the music they had created together was now bigger than both of them. He recruited new talent, hit the road, and turned his grief into a massive theatrical stage show that the world had never seen. He didn't just survive the loss, he built an empire on the foundation they had laid. By the mid-80s, Ozzy wasn't just a singer anymore, He was a cultural phenomenon. He was the Prince of Darkness, a title he earned through blood, sweat, and the refusal to let tragedy define him. He had defied the industry, defied his critics, and most importantly, he had defied his own destruction. By the 1990s and early 2000s, Ozzy Osbourne had achieved something very few musicians ever do. He moved beyond the music. He became an archetype. This is the era where the Jack Nicholson of rock persona truly took hold. But what does that comparison actually mean? Think about Jack Nicholson in The Shining or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He is dangerous, he is unpredictable. He has a wicked sense of humor, and even when he's being bad, you cannot take your eyes off him. Ozzy became that same magnet for the rock world. He was the elder statesman of chaos. While younger bands were trying to be edgy by following trends, Ozzy was simply being himself, a man who lived on the edge of a knife for decades and survived to tell the tale. He possessed a specific kind of unhinged charisma that made him both terrifying to parents and deeply lovable to his fans. He was the Prince of Darkness, but he was also the man who would look into a camera and crack a joke that made him feel like your favorite eccentric uncle. This decade saw the birth of Ozzfest. Again, defying the industry's logic, Ozzy didn't just play the festivals, he built the festival. At a time when metal was being told it was dead by the mainstream media, Ozzy created a traveling circus that launched the careers of Slipknot, Linkin Park, and System of a Down. He wasn't just a performer anymore, he was the gatekeeper of an entire culture. He was the godfather who decided who got a seat at the table. Then came the moment that changed everything, the Osbournes. In a move that shocked the rock world, the man who supposedly bit the heads off bats invited the world into his living room. It was the first celebrity reality show of its kind, and it was a masterstroke of branding. It humanized the legend. The world saw that the godfather of metal struggled with the same things everyone else did: noisy neighbors, tangled remote controls, and rebellious kids. This was the Jack Nicholson effect in full swing. Even when he was doing something as mundane as taking out the trash, his personality was so large, so strange, and so authentic that it became the highest-rated show in MTV history. But beneath the reality TV fame and the lovable dad image, the musician remained a titan. He continued to release platinum albums, showing a vocal stamina that defied medical science. He was a survivor of the highest order. He survived a near-fatal quad bike accident. He survived decades of substance abuse that would have killed a dozen normal men, and he survived the constant shifting of musical tastes. He stayed at the top because he never tried to be anyone else. He didn't chase the grunge sound of the 90s or the pop-punk sound of the 2000s. He remained the heavy, melodic, and dark presence that he had always been. He was a constant in a world of variables. Like Nicholson, he didn't need to change his act to fit the times. The times eventually changed to fit him. He had become a permanent fixture of the cultural landscape, an icon whose face was as recognizable as the Hollywood sign. By the time the 2024 induction rolled around, the world wasn't just celebrating a singer, they were celebrating a man who had become a living monument to the spirit of rock and roll. He was the ultimate anti-hero who had won the game by refusing to play by the rules. This is the moment the hero has been waiting for. On October 19, 2024, the world stopped to acknowledge what the fans had known for decades. Ozzy Osbourne isn't just a survivor, he is the undisputed king of metal. Jack Black, the ultimate, nameless rock aficionado, takes the mic and delivers what will go down as one of the greatest induction speeches in history. His face turns beet red as he screams at the top of his lungs, "This motherfucker invented heavy metal." Black's speech is the perfect bridge between the two eras of Ozzy. He speaks for every 13-year-old kid who ever felt transfixed by the cover of Blizzard of Oz. He calls Ozzy the Jack Nicholson of rock, not just for the chaos, but for the sheer, undeniable charisma. As Black reels off Ozzy's former jobs, plumber, slaughterhouse worker, car horn tuner, you realize the gravity of the hero's journey. This is a man who came from nothing to create a world of his own. Then the camera pans to the side of the stage. There sits Ozzy, 75 years old, perched on a massive leather bat-winged throne. He looks regal, yet humbled. When he speaks, he keeps it short, proving that a true legend doesn't need a long monologue to command a room. He thanks the fans, his loyal soldiers who never left his side, and he singles out the two people who made this possible. The late, great Randy Rhoads and his wife Sharon, who he credits with literally saving his life. But a coronation isn't complete without a celebration. What follows is an 8-minute masterclass in musical power. An all-star band, including Metallica's Robert Trujillo and Red Hot Chili Peppers' Chad Smith, takes the stage. The energy shifts as the first notes of Crazy Train rip through the arena. Tool's Maynard James Keenan takes the lead, and even from his throne, Ozzy lets out his iconic "All Aboard" cry. The medley continues with country star Jelly Roll bringing a soulful dirty grit to "Mama, I'm Coming Home," while Zakk Wylde shreds a guitar solo so intense he wanders out into the crowd. Finally, Billy Idol takes the helm for No More. Tears, the song that proved Ozzy had 5 platino, 5 times platinum, staying power. As the music reaches its crescendo, you see Ozzy and Jack Black on the side of the stage, mouthing every single word. This wasn't just a performance, it was a heavy metal church where the disciples came to pay their respects to the man who started it all. The man who was once fired from the building was now being worshipped by its greatest inhabitants. How do you measure the life of a man who was told 1,000 times that he wouldn't make it? To truly understand the legacy of Ozzy Osbourne, you have to look past the Prince of Darkness costumes, the reality TV cameras, and the wild stories of hotel room madness. You have to look at the sheer, undeniable gravity of his survival. In an industry that eats its young and forgets its old, Ozzy has remained a fixed point on the horizon for over 50 years. This final chapter isn't just about a trophy or a plaque in a museum in Cleveland. It is about the ultimate vindication of the human spirit. When Jack Black called him the Jack Nicholson of rock, he wasn't just talking about a vibe. He was talking about a standard of excellence that never wavered, even when the person behind it was falling apart. The hero's journey we followed from that lonely hotel room in 1979 to the bat-winged throne of 2024 is a lesson in the power of defiance. Ozzy Osbourne defied the expectations of his bandmates, the predictions of the medical world, and the constraints of his own mortality. He became a legend not because he was perfect, but because he was authentic. In a world of manufactured stars and carefully curated social media personas, Ozzy was always, unapologetically, Ozzy. His legacy is written in the DNA of every heavy metal band that has ever picked up a guitar. Every time a musician chooses to be weird rather than commercial, they are following the path Ozzy blazed. Every time an artist faces a career-ending setback and decides to start over from scratch, they are channeled the spirit of the Blizzard of Oz. He didn't just give us songs, he gave us a culture. He created a space where the outcasts, the rebels, and the crazy ones felt like they belonged. Ozzfest didn't just sell tickets, it built a community. His solo career didn't just sell records, it provided the soundtrack for 3 generations of fans to navigate their own dark times. The 2024 induction ceremony serves as the final proof of instant karma. It shows that if you stay true to your craft long enough, the world eventually has no choice but to bow. The industry that tried to bury him in 1979 was the same industry that stood on its feet to give him a 10-minute standing ovation. The peers, who might have once looked down on his antics, are the same ones who now fight for the chance to stand on stage and play his riffs. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this legacy is the man himself. As he sat on that throne in 2024, Ozzy wasn't looking for revenge on those who fired him. He wasn't bitter about the years of struggle. He was grateful. He showed us that the hero doesn't end the story by destroying his enemies. He ends it by outlasting them and finding peace. He is the Jack Nicholson of rock because he is a one of one. There will never be another Ozzy Osbourne because the world simply couldn't handle another one. As the lights dim on the 2024 ceremony, we are left with a powerful realization. The Prince of Darkness didn't just survive the darkness, he learned how to rule it. He turned his pain into power, his chaos into a career, and his madness into a masterpiece. He is the solo legend who defied everything, and in doing so he became immortal. Long live the king, all aboard.